Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm pleased to be speaking to you from the pulpit of my congregation on the subject of Purim in the year of the invasion of Ukraine. This coming Shabbat, we will celebrate the prayers asking for blessing in the new month of Adar, the Hebrew month Adar. That is the month of the holiday of Purim. The holiday of Purim celebrates our escape as a Jewish people from the genocidal plotting of Haman. Haman was a prime minister of the Empire of Persia. According to the biblical story narrated in the book of Esther, Haman gulled the emperor Ahasuerus into consenting to the extermination of a particular people, namely the Jews, on the trumped-up charge that they did not obey the emperor's laws. Only the heroic efforts of a Jewish queen, Queen Esther, and her cousin, the courtier Mordecai, saved our people from what was nothing less than a planned Holocaust. The holiday of Purim is celebrated with great merriment. We enjoy wine and tasty snacks. We indulge in fun and games in the synagogue almost without parallel during the liturgical year. Costumes and parties are the order of the day. But underneath all the fun and games is a very serious reality. Anti-Jewish bigots tried to kill us and almost succeeded. Purim is merry because we are giddy with happiness about having survived an existential threat. One more sobering feature of the holiday ought to remain vivid in our memory. According to the book of Esther, the Jews had to fight for their survival. Even after Haman's plot had been exposed and Haman himself had been executed, his followers still tried to annihilate the Jews. Only a determined battle, more protracted in the urban theaters of war fighting, ended in the victory and therefore the survival of the Jewish people. All of this leads us to think about Purim from the perspective of the year 2023. From this vantage point, it is hard not to see how the invasion of Ukraine fits the mold of Purim. Indeed, it does. For the people of Ukraine, this year, spanning the period between last Purim and this, has been a year of death and destruction, a year of calculated brutality, or to express this in Jewish language, a year of Amalek. Amalek was the hereditary enemy of the people Israel during our formative centuries. The Bible reports that the Amalekites ambushed our ancestors as we were leaving Egypt and cut off all the stragglers in our marching column, all the feeble and weary. For that reason, we had to form up for battle with no military tradition to guide us. Under the leadership of Joshua, a band of former slaves held their own against the Amalekites, weakening that foe. Weakening, but not eliminating. Amalek endured to plague our people from generation to generation, just as the book of Exodus had predicted. Jewish tradition connects Amalek with the wicked prime minister of Persia, Haman, the villain of the Purim story. That is because Haman is styled the Agagite, and Agag himself was the king of Amalek in the days of Israel's King Saul and prophet Samuel. In his genocidal fury, Haman has had numerous disciples, children in that broader sense, if not the strict genealogical sense. Such mass murderers often target Jews, and in the past century our losses have exceeded those of all previous generations. on account of the unholy marriage of racism and modern technology with the primal evil of the mass murderer's heart. A year ago, I was not immediately convinced that the Russian invasion of Ukraine was in the typology of Amalek attacking Israel. Perhaps, to think in terms of the book of Ezekiel, it was the war of Gog and Magog, two enemies, each of whom had blood on their hands. Certainly until fairly recent times, Ukraine was disfigured by centuries of virulent anti-Semitism. But for me, the situation quickly clarified. On its side, Ukraine emerged as a nation that had taken great strides to overcome its anti-Semitic past. It was orienting itself more and more to a tolerant and free Western model. That was unpalatable for the former KGB officer now ruling as dictator of Russia. Vladimir Putin used the anti-fascist rhetoric that still resonates with his people as a fig leaf to seek to accomplish his goal of restoring the empire of tsars and commissars. For me, it soon became clear, quote, who was the Nazi now? And it was not Ukraine. A year ago, it looked quite likely that the 40-mile-long column of Russian tanks and other military vehicles would sweep into Kyiv, overthrow the democratically elected government, install a Russian-approved puppet, and notch another victory for authoritarianism, another defeat to a rules-based international order. But that has not happened. The dogged resistance of the Ukrainian fighters, spurred on, no doubt, by the realization that their very existence as a free nation was in jeopardy, coupled with savvy aid rendered by the United States, Great Britain, and other Western powers, showed the deep deficiencies of the rigid Soviet-style Russian armed forces. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, deserves at least a meaningful part of the credit in the survival of his nation. This Jewish actor-turned-politician has become the closest parallel in the 21st century to the Winston Churchill of 1940. Indeed, with only some geographical changes, Zelensky is the one contemporary leader with the standing to utter words similar to these immortal words of Churchill. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. As a Jew, I am sympathetic to Ukraine, struggling for survival against an enemy that is like Amalek, an enemy that has no compunction about targeting children in school, bombing railway stations filled with civilians trying to flee the war zone, shelling neighborhoods deliberately, killing the defenseless, relying on war crimes more than any other tactic. Purim in this Jewish year, 5783, is perhaps closer to its sober roots than to its merry customs. This year, let us remember that Purim is not only a holiday of blue and white, the colors of Israel's flag, but also of the Ukrainian, blue and yellow. Shalom.